Hi, I'm Jen Spencer, and this is Jen Spencer's 10-Minute Book Club. Hi, readers. I'm so excited to have you here today. Today, we're going to talk with Annette Lyon, who is the USA Today best-selling author of Tailor Made, which is not a Regency, but it's set in Finland in the late 1800s. You're going to love hearing about her research and Finland in general, and just all the things that went into writing her book. If you ask a question or leave a comment in the comment section below, you'll be entered to win a copy of Tailor Made by Annette Lyon and my book, Dandelion Meadows, which is a sweet romantic comedy set in a small town with quirky and delightful characters. I hope you pick it up. Now I'm so excited to introduce Annette Lyon. Annette, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to hear about you, a little about you and your books. So why don't you tell us about yourself and maybe how you got into writing?
So I am one of those weird ones who wanted to be a writer as a little girl. So right around second grade, possibly earlier, I started reading Beverly Cleary's Ralph, the Mouse and the Motorcycle and Ralph S. Mouse. And I was like, I don't want to do this. So my first attempt at writing was about a mouse, a mean Marvin the mouse who had pulled a girl's hair at school. But yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer as far as I can remember. And so I was a English major and history minor, and because I love, those two fit together. I've done a lot of historical fiction. But yeah, I grew up mostly in Utah, but I spent 3 years in Finland, where my mother is from. She was born and raised in Helsinki. Mm-hmm. And so I went to school there for 3 years and all that. And my Finnish heritage is such a huge part of who I am. And so it's leaked into my work. So several of my books take place in Finland or have Finnish themes to them.
So do you speak Finnish?
I'm getting it back. Yeah, I actually, since I went to a Finnish school, I learned Finnish.
Wow.
And then my father kept saying, we need to speak Finnish at home or you girls are going to forget it. My little sister picked it up. She was just a little bit younger. And so she picked it up to the point that her friends did not believe she was American because she had no accent. And she was losing her English. So like her sentences would be peppered with both languages. And so I was like, yeah, Dad, I'll forget how to walk too. Like, that's not going to happen. And you come home and after a while it starts to fade away a little bit. So the last several years I've been working on kind of getting it back.
You talked about Beverly Cleary. I bet she inspired a lot of young writers because she was her stories were so fun and so delightful, and I just think she probably did inspire a lot of people.
Oh, I'm sure. I read so many of her books. I mean, all the way through. I remember we left for Finland after 4th grade. So, but between second and fourth, I don't know how. I read so many of her books and just loved them all. She's so real, and somehow she taps into that childhood innocence and curiosity and the things that matter to children. And I think that's actually huge for any writer and any reader. Like, you can tap into something that really matters to someone at their core, then that's what storytelling is all about, right?
Yeah, I mean, her mouse books are amazing, but her other books like the Ramona books, and I just think, wow, she really had a feel for how to reach young kids. I love that.
And she had a feel for sibling relationships with Ramona and Jesus and all. Yeah, she's fantastic.
So fun. Well, so tell us about this book that you're going to give away, Tailor Made. It's set in Finland, right?
It is. It's set in Helsinki, Finland, in the late 1800s. So this is, again, my Finnish heritage showing here. There's a lot of Finnish history and European history that a lot of people don't know. And I thought it would be so much fun to write a story set during this period. So We think of the late 1800s as the Victorian era, but Queen Victoria, of course, wasn't in charge of everybody around the world. So at this time, Russia actually was the one that was in control of Finland. They had taken it over from Sweden in the early 1800s. I want to say like 1809, 1810, somewhere around there. They had a big war, and then Russia took control over Finland from Sweden. Sweden had had control for several centuries at that point. But the Finns had always had their own culture, their own language, their identity. And so you get into the late 1800s, and you start having these little rumblings of like, well, we want to be our own people. We want to govern ourselves. We want some independence. And Russia wasn't really keen on that. But during that year, so there's a lot more could go into on that. They got their independence at the end of World War I. But so this book takes place during the time that Russia was in charge of them, and it was called it was the Grand Duchy of Finland. So it takes place during the Grand Duchy era, and it kind of goes into a little bit about that desire for independence and freedom and the class system which was different from the ones we're usually used to hearing about from England and Germany and other places. So the story is about a young woman she's a seamstress and a knitter, and she is called to the capital, essentially hired to help create clothing for this duke's wedding that is coming up. His son is engaged to this Russian aristocrat. So she arrives at this tailor shop where he's the one who's in charge of doing the whole thing, and there's romance ensues, but there's also some political intrigue going on, because they realize there's absolutely no way they're going to get all of the clothing and everything taken care of before the wedding, and if this doesn't happen, then there's all these political ramifications that could lead to war. And is someone actually involved in like sabotaging their work, and what's going on with this? And anyway, it's a lot of fun, in my opinion. Starting out with just kind of humble characters, but how these little things can cause all kinds of problems. And so if you go on my Instagram, you can see pictures of where it takes place. Like this is the street. There's the cathedral. Here's where the mansion would have been, and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. With the Finnish system, it was if say there's a duke, his title goes to all of his sons, not just to the oldest. And his daughters would be duchesses as well. So it's like that title gets to go all the way through. And if a woman marries, she gets to keep her title if she already had one. And if she marries to a higher title, she can take that title. But if she marries to she's a duchess and marries a baron, she can still keep her duchess title, even if after she marries a baron, who's technically lower on. And that kind of was fascinating. And then it was the aristocratic houses then that ran the parliament, and they would send representatives if they didn't want to go themselves, and all that kind of thing under the Grand Duchy system. But so that was those are the biggest changes and differences that were interesting to me anyway.
I've always thought about people who live in Finland or the northern countries. My daughter lived in Toronto for a while, and I've always thought it's so cold. Do people just walk around and go, it is so cold here, why are we living here? Or is it one of those things where they've just adapted and they love the cold, and they love the summers, but they also just love kind of that cold, icy weather?
I would say it's something a little different. For one, they definitely love the warm weather. So it was funny that you'd see, people bringing out the shorts and tank tops when it's like 50 degrees, and you're like, what do you think? That's like, oh, this is balmy. But so we happened to live there when we found out, after the winters were underway, that we were there for two of the record-breaking winters of the century, which was really fun. And at first, my mom even was going, have I just become a wimp? I don't remember it being this cold. Then she heard the locals complaining. She's like, oh, okay, something's up. So one year during Christmas break, it actually dipped so low temperature that the Fahrenheit and Celsius met at -40. And the water pipes that are buried really deep so they won't freeze, froze for a day or so. So we're like, we're in our house, we're like, sweats and the gloves, we're playing Monopoly by the fire. It was nuts. And then the other really bad winter, it wasn't as cold, but it was like the longest spell of a certain amount of cold, like it was negative whatever for like 2 weeks. And that was a record. So the Finns don't love the cold at all. Of course, they love their snow sports and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's where like the sauna comes in. And most Americans would say the sauna, but it's pronounced sauna. So the first syllable rhymes with like cow, sauna. Because historically the sauna was the first thing they would build before they build their house. They'd build their sauna. That's where people would be brought to die. That's where women would give birth. That's where even in the middle of like World War II heinousness, they would have saunas out there so that the soldiers could have a break. And and it's such a huge part of the culture. That like really the Finns are like, they know how to deal with the cold. They don't like it, but they deal with it and they demand warmth as well. That makes sense. And I know a lot of Finns also, they'll do like not summer. They'll do like winter swimming, but it's like literally like 45 seconds in really, really cold water. And they've shown like scientifically that actually is good for the vagus nerve and physical health and all these things.
Yes, I've heard that.
But yeah, that's kind of where it started. Like, oh, this is awesome. Because somehow I feel better now. But that's the Finns definitely. I think anyone up north, they really celebrate summer when it's around because it's so light. And when it's winter, you just deal with how dark it gets.
Yeah.
Which is it's really dark. I remember that in the dead of winter going to school, pitch black, going out to recess, yes, street light, like street lamps on the recess yard because it's that dark on first recess.
Amazing.
Then it would be light enough for second recess or whatever, and then you come home from school an hour later it's dark again. So and that was in Helsinki where it's lighter, and the farther north you get, the darker it gets in the winter, and then the lighter in the summer. So
summer. Wow,
kind of crazy.
Amazing. Well, that's so fun. It's interesting, kind of the current political climate. Finland is kind of, you hear a little bit more about it and what their concerns are and because I didn't realize that they were part of, that they were a Russian, whatever.
Yeah, and they have a lot of history with Russia. In fact, so one interesting thing this will be, in the past for those who see this down the road, but so one of the biggest things I'm seeing right now in the news that the whole Ukrainian conflict is it's fascinating to me because the Russian army is making a lot of the same mistakes they made in 1939 and 1940 with the Finns, which is fascinating. There was a whole section of World War II a lot of people know nothing about, called the Winter War, which was when Stalin essentially said, oh, well, I need to have all this extra land to protect Leningrad, my capital. So Finland need to give me all this land. And of course, he really was just trying to take over another country. He had already had, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. He just wanted one more. The rest of the world knew that's what he was doing. But Finns tried to negotiate things. And of course, he said, no, I'm going to invade. He blamed it on the Finns, like, oh, they shot first. They were the aggressors. Does that sound familiar? Then he invaded with, if I remember right, it was something like 3 or 4 times the force the Allies had on D-Day came in on the first day of the Winter War into Finland. So we're talking massive, massive military to this teeny tiny country. And at this point, remember, the Soviet Union was an ally in World War II. So what are we supposed to be doing here? So they're like, well, we can't be against our own ally, and yet he can't be invading this little country. And like, it was a mess. A lot of countries promised help and they never sent it. A lot of it were like, oh, look at these plucky Finns, they're fighting so hard. Does that sound familiar? An interesting thing too is that Stalin sent his soldiers in with about less than a week's worth of supplies, food and fuel. That's happened again.
Oh my goodness, I heard that on the news.
Like seriously, they thought that the conflict would be over within a week. And so like the Finns, they'll surrender in a week. Didn't happen, not even almost. And we're seeing the same thing with the Ukrainian military. It's just the people there are just basically we'll die rather than surrender to this monster. And so I'm saying there's all these parallels with Stalin invading Finland. I'm like, what is going on? Like, history is repeating itself in Ukraine. It's nuts. I'm grateful that the world seems to be, trying to help Ukraine at this point. But it kind of blows my mind thinking, Putin, do you not know your country's own history? You are literally repeating the same military mistakes that Stalin did. Like, I don't get this. Like, anyway, but yeah, there's even more parallels than that. But it's like mind blowing. You start seeing all of these crazy things that happened during the Winter War, and Putin's making the same choices. So crazy.
Well, the world changes, but I feel like people never do. And they just, it's so hard, so hard. Well, yeah, that is fascinating. Well, okay, we're out of time, but I'd just love to know, what is your favorite romantic movie?
Oh, okay, this is easy. Much Ado About Nothing, the one from '93, I believe,
with Kenneth
Branagh, Emma Thompson, Denzel Washington, Michael Keaton. It's got this huge cast. It's the first movie and only movie I've watched in the theater over and over again, because I could go in there miserable, sad, depressed, and come out happy. And the soundtrack to this day can break a writer's block at any time.
Really? Oh, I have not thought about that movie for years, but I adore that movie. I'm a real Shakespeare fan. In high school, I watched all those Shakespeare plays that the BBC did. And yes, that was a genius movie. It was so good. Even Keanu Reeves. Yeah. I thought he was such a good bad guy. He was just
so fun. Oh, I just love that whole show. In fact, Much Ado is one of my favorite Shakespeare's. So one of my books is a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, set in 1860 Salt Lake City.
Oh, really?
Spires of Stone. It looks very serious, but it's actually a romantic comedy because it's based on Much Ado About Nothing. So
one of your books?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called Spires of Stone.
Okay. Here's the last question I ask everybody. If you're stuck on a desert island, would you rather have chocolate or toilet paper, a lifetime supply?
That is a really tricky question, because thinking, depending on the type of island, I could make my own toilet paper, but I probably can't make my own chocolate. Okay. But then again, if I don't have the toilet paper, I could get sick and get disease. But I'm going to go with the idea that maybe I could make my own toilet paper, so then I'll just go with the chocolate.
Okay, that's great. I love it. Well, Annette, thank you so much for being here. Readers, remember, if you ask a question or make a comment in the comment section below, you'll be entered to win a copy of Tailor Made by Annette Lyon and a copy of Dandelion Meadows by Jen Spencer. And Annette, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.